Bad Side, rocking with your favorite friendly friend Siggity Seedy Motivator, with the vibes that I bring Girl Neuroticy, also known as Jenny B.
I'm a bitch, I'm the bad bitch, I'm a rich, I'm a bitch.
Today, we are talking to Chacha, reading Chacha. Opinions, lifestyles of opinions. Chacha. Lifestyles of rich and famous. Whenever I was younger, my mom almost had braces, And so whenever I was at the dentist, he was like, oh, telling me the position of each of my teeth, and it made me. He was like, and it made me self-conscious. I was like, I don't want braces. He said that I was gonna have to need a headset. I was gonna have to sleep with a headset. So, that's very dorky. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna sleep with a headset. What if I have a sleepover or whatever? Nowadays the passive aggressiveness is just delightful to try to transcribe. When you speak multiple languages, to speak multiple languages without speaking multiple languages. Like, speak an accent and not realize you're speaking an accent until everyone's like, I'm not going to talk to that girl. That girl, has a weird, accent. And then some people are turned on by it. They're like, oh, look at that person with the weird accent. You start following them, what they do every day, who they do every day, and, things and stuff and such. You're not taught the perspective of, oh, you're supposed to not have an opinion about, the birds and the bees. As if they don't, we're talking about gender affirming, politics in schools. Gender affirming, what if, they allow females to drive in a country where, they make, they make it illegal to show your face, within the traditions of religion, religical, it could be, tracing your heritage to, things and stuff and such, as they would say. Things and stuff and such, because and they would probably not say, to say that is an unstiggity thing. You don't do that, And if you do, you better talk about the purpose of, all that things and stuff and such. Because life is not guaranteed, for the normal people. You're not supposed to be thinking about your life being guaranteed just because you show your face on screen, Because totally not a heritage of a heretic. Heretic. You have to look at your fingers while you're typing. You know, they had the covers in school, so you don't look at your hands. In the Bible it says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Alright. Definition of heretic. A person believing in... A person believing in or practicing religious heresy. It's heresy, I tell you. A person holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. Burn the witch! You know, there's opinions at odds with what is generally accepted. You know, is that allowed to be, you know, too cool for your school? You know, to be the baby born with the cigar in its mouth. You know, things and stuff and such. This is speaking full sentences as if, you know, lifestyle and, you know, habit habitually become, you know, a job, a career, a motivation. You know, a person believing or practicing religious heresy, is that not, you know, your daily prayers? You know, you zone with the people believing in and practicing religious heresy. You know, what if they had the internet, you know, and they could Google what religious heresy really is, and how long, you know, the life expectancy is of those that, you know, within a certain era of of life, you know, what is the, you know, life expectancy? You know, we never talked about life expectancy and the importance or lack thereof importance within practice of life expectancy and why you should expect life. You know, rather having, you know, life try to expect something from you is not just, you know, certain religious heresies. And then you have to think back to the times of the Crusades, you know, where holding an opinion that may or may not be at odds, you know, within understanding error, you know, error and era, you know, with what is generally accepted. And how could this, you know, become an opinion of a person that doesn't believe, you know, doesn't know what believing is, and then, you know, practicing religious heresy? You know, to hold an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted because of an agenda. What if this agenda was, you know, over 10 years old and it was, you know, it was already, you know, kind of played out? And why would you speak of, you know, why would you speak of Israel, you know, if you're a brownie in your Odyssey? That is not the question that we wanted to raise. Oh, you know, the question is racism. You know, we had the Civil War. You know, is it racist to think that you could dictate something because it looks similar to you? You know, that is, you know, religious heresy. You know, maybe it's not religious heresy. Maybe it's a gentle nudge towards, you know, the understanding that you know, have a higher purpose beyond what you, the person that you know, feel to know whenever you look in the mirror. You know, make some TikToks about it. You know, be high on the inspiration of the fact that, you know, you're playing with an agenda that you know, if you know, if there was an end button, I bet you there would be a restart button. Nowadays, they have self-driving cars, and they have cars that, you know, you pump the brakes, you know, and, you know, don't, you know, it is an action of the foot. You pump the brakes, and you press the button, you know. Then again, to be certainly practicing, you know, religious heretic. You know, you might not, oh, you know, Israel is white. You know, oh, can you not have an error of precepts and notions and understandings of, you know, the dark web and, you know, type beats, to be a type beat kid, you know, to figure out all, you know, that bullshit, you know. Oh, it's like 5G, you know, there was the internet, and then, you know, there was 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and things and stuff and such. You know, to think that could be an era, because what if there was, you know, a freaking bomb went off, and all of a sudden, all the electronics are offline, you know? Enjoying offline life, because, you know, time is, you know, a guarantee whenever you have a certain agenda now, isn't it? You know, that would never be prevalent to the notion of, you know, have an opinion, you know. Because, you know, how could you maybe, you know, allow me to have opinions? Allow me, you know. This is not how normal people speak. So to try to have business where you need to mind your own business, and to realize, you know, to not be scared of, you know, the freedom of speech, because it's not supposed to have implications. And if there are implications, I would imagine that, you know, I would master those implications. And there would be a vaccine, there would be a way around, you know, certain people's bullshit. You know, to live with yourself, because you made it a social, oh, it's socially acceptable, you know, to be degenerate. You know, those critics in the comment sections that think that they know, you know, the weather in Timbuktu. Oh, hi. There is such thing as the internet, and you have been, you know, why would I be banned? Oh, well, maybe that's because, you know, there's a whole research project as to how, you know, the anatomy of a consistent suggested thoughts, you know, consistent suggested thoughts, you know, consistent suggested thoughts, you know, to be versatile and volatile with, you know, the structure at which you do business, and that you practice your perfection, because sometimes you have to hide your perfection. You know, oh, don't talk to those guys, they fight themselves. You know, we're gonna steal all the freaking oil from Iran or Iraq, because it's within the hierarchy social structure to mitigate the existence of, you know, third world country type beat. You know, it's a third world country online whenever, you know, you allow your children to watch TikTok. You know, because they're learning all their information from TikTok anyway, I would imagine, you know. to study how people are. This is a human in rare human form, you know? Things and stuff and such. To be in rare form, you know, and to allow rare form to be, to allow rare form. And then you have to think of the precipice of pride, if you watch this, what type of pride does this bring you? And then already understanding that that's being, put into practice, because, what really is practice whenever is that you're not allowed to, not be allowed. Studying. Oh, thank you for sharing the broadcast. How, your friends can be. Because would your friends treat you differently, friends, to realize that this is all just a social platform, of holographic social, structure, seemingly. Why seemingly? Because, to be a heretic is Middle English from Old French heretic, Latin Greek. Let me see if I have the translator on. I'm studying gaming. Hola, Brazil. Oh my gosh, golly gee wilders. Just because we watch the same thing on TV, how dare you think that you can have rights over the TV remote? Oh my gosh, is that a TV remote? Does that mean I can add a Netflix button on that shit? You could have freaking... What is that? Let's see how long, and how long that plays out and how that affects, society. What society? To honestly, never mind. Because, you're supposed to question how Jenga is, it's this way, and then it's this way, and then it's this way, and then it's this way. I don't know how it ended up being a sim. I have a list of hobbies. Well, it's good to have a list of hobbies. I would imagine that is the order and structure of living a long, fulfilled life, to teach yourself hobbies. And, things that are habit to you can also be a hobby, Maybe you could science, how people could live longer, while, smoking or, taking marijuana. Those hardcore, drugs where they have the, the store with the different, different shades of marijuana. To different shades of marijuana. to be an enthusiast, or to know, to learn, you know, what enthusiasm is, and to, you know, to regulate. To regulate, you know, having a broadcast without the microphone like me, because, you know, to be certainly partial to certain politics, you know, because you didn't think about, you know, or maybe you did think about, you know, the productive features. Shall we have productive productive features? Oh. And your Odyssey. Different. Because, you know, to view stature, you know, the same as stature, would it be stature? You know, it could be stature. Everything is a science nowadays, you know. It's a beautiful thing about life. Quiero ser diferente, que. You know, linguistically, you know, COVID, what if I could, you know, kill you while you're sitting there watching your TV? Are you sitting there watching your TV, trying to play with the damn Netflix, you know, add a Netflix button on there? You know, how would you come up with the screenwriters to utilize, you know, the copyright of movies from the 90s? How dare you? Know your place. And sound card connection died. Yeah. Let me find a fucking connection. And I'll show you how I scienced, you know. Oh, is that a connection? Let me, you know, make sure that, you know, you be a product of your environment. Connection. Oh my gosh, we're gonna circle jerk. You know, how connected are you? When you watching everyone circle jerk. It's like, you know, I'll be over here. Oh, utilizing, you know, the essence of, you know, being a fan. There's karaoke by mobile phone? No way. Connect the smartphone headset, microphone to the podcast console as the picture shows. Cuesta. Film con es días. You know, where is the picture showing for you? Because if I don't realize that, you know, the picture is showing for you, you know, then we're gonna have problems, you know. Because all I hear is crickets and wannabe thugs. You know, they're like, oh, you know, I have a sexual drive. You know, I can write lyrics. I have ideas. And all together, they are a fully functioning adult. You know, PG-13 films have PG-13 films need to be rated R is to know within heretics. Oh yeah, so who knew that you can make, the life of an individual, your job, your career, because it definitely wasn't the comments, reflected on the individual, weak ass comments, and they probably have noted and tried not to stress me out too much, Nothing, only guitar. Oh, has this been a show for you guys? Have you guys been enjoying the show? Where's the show coming from? It's coming from the guitar, man. Everybody has guitars nowadays. No. My nails are too long. My nails are too long. My house in Budapest, my hidden treasure chest, my beautiful Castillo. I'd lose it all over you. I'd lose it all. Enzo. Enzo, the stable genius. Stability is a mindset, Once you choose your mindset, maybe you choose your battles in life. And sometimes if you choose your battles, that's unstiggity, Jetty. There are people out here choosing their battles. Don't realize it's nothing. You play guitar too? How old is your guitar? So this is a Fender Capistrano. And it has an electric head and an acoustic body. And it has inlays. There are inlays on here. Is that even sticking? Is that sticking? I don't want to know what the inlays are thinking unless, it's IRL. Nowadays with this virtual world, IRL is like, oh, I'm gonna make my lifestyle IRL, I'm gonna try to influence society IRL.